Your host, Paul Lane. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Hey, guys, I want to make a couple of quick announcements. Those of you who follow the show know that I am a very big supporter and proponent of CALMA. That is the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. There's going to be a big mixer tomorrow. It's going to be a whole bunch of authors that are going to be over here at Raíces, over at 2060 West Colfax, right under the Colfax Bridge. Man, I got to tell you guys, this place is really cool. Also, the food truck outside is awesome. But it's going to be really great, guys. I went to a mixer back in the fall, and I didn't sleep all night, man. I'll tell you what, you want to be in the presence of some very, very intelligent and gifted authors. This is the place to be. It's tomorrow from 2 to 5 at Raíces, over at 2060 West Colfax. Also, there was a burial, or actually a worship site in New Mexico that was burned down over on Hermit's Peak in New Mexico last week. It was devastating. There's a sweat lodge there. There's elder residences there. There's a gathering places, and the place burned down. And so there's a GoFundMe page going up right now. You could go to my Facebook page at Weekend Boost, and I put a link there to the GoFundMe page. Also, just to let you know, it is Rebuild Gensario Ceremony Site Destroyed by Fire. Rebuild Gensario is Genizaro. Genizaro, forgive me. Ceremony Site Destroyed by Fire. Also, our sponsor for the show is David Ronquillo. David Ronquillo has written a trilogy of books. This is his second to the last one, Make It Go Away. A couple more books that are available. You can get those on the show, KUHS.com, or you can reach out to me on my website, on my Facebook page. I am the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. And with that, we will go ahead and get started on our show. I am so honored today. Manuel Ramos is not just a community figure, but he's someone who has made a real impact on his community through his books. He's actually written 10 books, right? Is that right?
11 now.
He's actually got we're going to be talking about a short collection of stories, Denver Noir, and he has a short story in there. Very, very cool story, surprising ending, very good read. But Manuel Ramos really, in his story, wrote some very, very gripping details, or call it opinions or whatever you want, but about North Denver and about some of the changes that are going on in North Denver.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my books and my writing, and I know you're an avid reader, and you know a lot about literature already. I can tell. I mean, we've talked several times, and
Thank you.
I appreciate the attention you give to books and to writers and authors. It's it's something that we all can use as support of the culture.
Yes.
Of the literature. I live in North Denver. I live in the North Side, what used to be called the North Side, and which is as much of Denver as has been lately. It's gone through all kinds of changes. New people moving in, and a lot of the older people who have been in the neighborhoods for years having to move out, and new housing. A lot of changes going on in the city of Denver. It's the last 10 years or so have seen such dramatic changes that a lot of people say that it's not the same town that it used to be.
No.
And I know the North Side is not the same neighborhood that I've lived in now for 40 years. I've lived on the North Side of Denver, so I've seen all these kinds of changes. And my writing that I do is often based in my neighborhood where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So my novels, a lot of them happen or start in the North Side of Denver.
Mm-hmm.
My main characters are people who've lived and grown up in the North Side of Denver. So that's the novels, a bigger space to tell stories, and crime fiction, so there's always some kind of mystery or something like that going on with the books. The short story you're talking about that is just being published actually this week, May 3rd, the books come out in the bookstores. It's called Denver Noir, and it's an interesting concept. The publisher is a publisher called Akashic Books. They're out of Brooklyn, New York, and they have published more than 100 of these books that are in the Noir series, they're called. And what they do is they pick a city, and they started in Brooklyn, of course, and they ask a dozen or so writers to take a neighborhood in the city.
Well, I'm going to have you get a little closer to the microphone. I'm sorry.
To take a neighborhood in the city and write a story about that particular neighborhood, and then they put it together into one book. So there have been more than 100 of these books, noir books by Akashic, and you know they've gone really worldwide. Paris, Singapore, Cuba, Europe, you know,
Chicago, I saw Chicago.
And then all over the U.S.
All over the U.S. too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Los Angeles, Chicago, Tampa. I mean, you name the city, and they've probably got a book about it. But what they had forgotten or overlooked or not done was Denver, you know. And writers have been talking about the fact that really there should be one of these collection of stories about Denver or the Rocky Mountain region or something like that, you know. So finally, Akashic has done it. They picked Cynthia Swanson, a local writer, to be the editor, and then she invited 14 writers to contribute a story. You know, and this started more than a year ago. I mean, you know, we're talking a year and a half ago at least, when the idea finally came to fruit and the writers started writing their stories. So I picked the Northside as my neighborhood, and I wrote this short story. It's called Northside Nocturne, and it's part of the collection. It's part of the 14 stories in this book. And I gotta say that Cynthia Swanson, the editor, did an excellent job of selecting a very diverse pool of writers to tell these stories. So, you know, we've got younger writers, we've got old timers like me, male, female.
Really diverse group.
Very diverse.
Yeah, it was really interesting going through the book, and there was, you know, stories about Glendale, and there was Union Station, Auraria, Five Points, Washington Park, Globeville, you know, Northside. I mean, it was like, wow, this is home, you know, this is me. And so it was really exciting, you know, Aurora, Capitol Hill, Cheeseman Park, Lakewood, Sloan's Lake, Baker, South Broadway. So, you know, I mean, chances are you grew up in one of these neighborhoods.
Well, I think most people in Denver will be very familiar with the neighborhoods, and the way the authors are, you know, you get a feel for the neighborhood, you get a feel for the area that they're writing about.
Absolutely.
And the characters are all over the place too. You know, there are all kinds of people in these stories. So I'm really excited about this book. I think all the authors who have participated are very excited. We're going to have a book launch coming on May 3rd, where the book is officially published. That'll be at the Tattered Cover. But then after that, in May and actually through June, there are going to be more events around town where the various writers will be at different venues. We'll be reading pieces of our stories, talking about the book, and of course the book will be for sale, and the writers will be there to sign. Now, not all 14 are going to read, you know, at every venue, so we're going to kind of alternate and have different writers make different presentations depending on where we are. But
wow,
I urge your listeners and the people watching the show to, you know, to check it out. There's plenty of information about the venues and when we're doing these things and what the stories are about. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us at the Akashic Books website. And if you're familiar at all with Facebook, you can look at my page. I've got a bunch of stuff there about the book. So,
also, if you're interested and you want to reach out to my page on Weekend Boost, I can put you in touch with Mr. Ramos and you know, get a book in your hands. But I'll tell you what I like is so many people are so short notice, like short attention spans anymore. A short collection of stories like this is so convenient for a lazy person.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something very comfortable about a short story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get in, you see the story, you read the story, there's the conflict, and then the resolution, and it's over. A novel is a commitment, I mean, to write it and to read it, but, you know, it's a different kind of literary escape.
Yes.
And a short story can be very satisfying, I feel. You know, you get the whole thing in the short burst of the plot and the characters. It's a different way of writing too.
Oh yeah, you got to get to the point. You got to be concise, and
you have to know your trade. You know, you got to know your craft to do a short story for sure, because it is very different. Many writers have a hard time actually with short stories because they want to tell all the background, the bigger story, you know, get into it, which of course you really can't do with a short story.
right.
You know, years ago I was told that by somebody whom I've forgotten, but to write a short story you had to show up late and leave early. You know? You got to get in, do it, and then leave.
Yep. You know, I've heard when you do a 30-minute speech, you should practice for it 4 hours. When you do a 10-minute speech, you should practice 8 hours. And so, you know, it makes perfect sense that getting to the point is not only critical, it's essential for your story to become real, for it to materialize and to come to a conclusion, I guess.
Well, yeah, you've got, you want the reader to feel that they're actually experiencing something that could happen. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, unless you're writing fantasy or, you know, a different genre than what we've got in this collection of short stories, but, you know, the overall feeling has to be, it's realistic.
Mm-hmm.
The verisimilitude has to be accurate. So you've got to, as a writer, you know, from my point of view, it's hard work to get that. But once it happens, it's very gratifying, you know, very satisfying. This particular story in Denver Noir, Northside Nocturne, kind of came to me in a flash, you know, in a blast of emotion. And I kind of knew what was going to happen, but then, of course, writing it out, I found out more about these characters, more about Petey and Eddie, you know, the two main characters in the story. And so I hope readers can read it and say, oh yeah, I know people like that, you know, or I've met people like that, or this could really be happening.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. I love how you opened up the book, you start talking about Gaetanos, you know, and the first thing I said, oh yeah, I know what that is, you know, so it gripped me right away, you know, when you start talking about Eddie and his plight with his, you know, his mother and his house, and I don't want to give the story away, but I had to think to myself, he had to know how this story was going to end when he started it. You know, as I'm reading through it, it's like, oh wow, what's on the next, you know, what's the next page? And I told you this morning when we were waiting, you know, I just felt like, what a great ending, what a surprise, and you know, it was very a worthwhile read, and such an impactful story in a short, you know, short period. It was great.
Yeah, well, thank you. The yeah, like I said, this kind of story, this particular story came to me in a burst of imagination, and so I kind of didn't know where I was going to go with it. But you know, that doesn't always happen when I'm writing a novel, for example. You know, I can often be surprised by what happens next. You know, in a book, even more so with the eventual ending in the book. You know, I've had endings that I've written for various novels that have just totally surprised me. You know, and so this kind of story where I could kind of see it unfolding in front of me was a little bit different in terms of, well, I kind of know what's happening, but now can I get it on the page? You know, can I translate what I'm thinking about into words that the reader will understand what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, convey, absolutely. Yeah. In your book, Angels in the Wind.
Right.
Man, I just flowed. It was like, oh yeah, I was just like, you were just recently inducted into the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame. Actually, right after the show, the next weekend, they announced it. I was like, wow, yeah, I know him.
Yeah, that was last year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was honored to be included in the class of 2021. We got inducted into the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame. Yeah, I'm very proud of that, and appreciate the recognition that my writing is received from some folks. That was nice.
Tell me a little bit about Calma. By the way, I want to make sure and give you that website. Calma is www.calmaco.gov, and I just want to make sure to put that out, guys. But Calma, what is Calma?
Well, Calma is the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Calma, in other words. And it's an organization that is going on its, I think, second year of existence, so it's fairly new. I was not one of the original founders, but I was very happy when I heard that people were starting this organization, and were some real leaders in the community got together and decided that Latino and Latina writers and creatives, poets, non-fiction writers, fiction writers, could really benefit from an organization that represented their interests. And I wholeheartedly agree with that concept. You know, I mean, I belong to several different writers groups, several different writers associations, and Calma, though, is something really new and something that we've needed for a while. So when the original founders got together and started having their meetings, they had a vision of what the group should do. And so they decided, and you can see it in the name, that a mentoring program was very important for this kind of organization, to help and assist new writers and younger writers and less experienced writers, to team them up with more experienced writers, people who had been writing for a while and had some success in getting published or getting readers. So the mentoring program is at the core of the group, and it's a program that is churning along. You know, every time we have a meeting, we hear a report about the mentoring program, who's been added to it, who the mentors are, and what kinds of things we've been working on. So that's one thing that organization does, which I think is very important and essential.
Certainly is.
You know, to keep the culture growing and alive and fruitful, you need to have newer members come in. You need to have new artists, new writers all the time. So this will help support that idea. Another important aspect of Calma, I believe, is that they present events where the writers themselves are showcased.
Yes.
So they've had holiday book fairs, for example, around, you know, like Christmas, where people can actually meet the authors and buy their books. The event you mentioned that we're doing tomorrow at Raíces.
Yes.
Beer, what is it, Books and Beer?
Books, Beer, and Fun, or Books and Beer.
Books and Beer, which of course is a great combination. You know, the writers get together, their books are there, readers can come by, meet the authors, talk with them, find out more about Calma, buy the books, get them autographed, and have a good time too. I mean, the one you were talking about that we did earlier at Raíces, I thought that was a lot of fun. You know?
Oh, that was awesome. I mean, I did not sleep that night. I don't know if I talked to you since then, but I got home and I was so fired up. I mean, to be in a group of people who look like me,
Right.
who are forward moving and thinking and progressive, you know, thinkers and creative. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was a blessing for me. It was awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was a great event, and I expect the same kind of thing tomorrow. You know, it's going to be a nice day, I think, in terms of the weather. The venue is great. The bar, the people there are very friendly and welcoming.
Oh, yeah, it was very cool.
The authors. And we're going to have some really impressive writers there. I don't know if we can pull up the list of the writers who are going to be there, but there's going to be at least 8 different writers presenting their books. And again, it'll be young adult, short stories.
Men, women, just...
Yeah, you're right, that kind of stuff, so it'll be great. So that's another thing that Calma does, you know, I mean, to get the writers together. You know, writing is a very solitary kind of occupation, you know, it's I mean, I spend hours all by myself with nothing but a computer or a notepad, working on books and chapters and editing and that kind of stuff. And you know, you've got to be ready to do that if you're going to be a writer. You know, of course, spend all this time by yourself.
Absolutely.
Yourself. So this is great that we have an outlet to meet other people doing the same thing. We can talk about our art, talk about our craft, and just you know, impress on each other that hey, we're all kind of going through the same thing. And so it encourages the art, it encourages writing, and I think we're producing some valuable stuff. Another event that's coming up from Calma is the poetry event.
Oh, yes.
You know, we should mention that, where the main idea is that poetry has changed. Latina poetry is changed from the old school kind of stuff that some of us remember to what's happening today. And so this particular event, which is going to happen at what, Bar 38, I think, on
yeah, it's right on 38th, and I have that on email.
38th and Lowell.
Yeah, and that's a cool place too.
Yeah,
they
that's
had
another good venue. I mean, Calma did an earlier event there too, and we had a good time. So the poetry event will be you know, kind of different poets from different generations talking about their art, with the idea of comparing how things have changed or remained the same, or really what's happening with that. And Calma is responsible for doing that, and I think we can really say, if we don't do that kind of stuff, who's going to do it, right? I mean, who's really going to present our poets in this kind of setting?
Absolutely.
It's got to be us to do it, and so through Calma, you know, we're able to do that kind of stuff.
Man, thank you for bringing that up. I was seeing that earlier this week, and I thought, man, I got to make sure and announce that. And there's going to be some really good readings. Those of you who watch the show regularly know that I had Dr. Ramon del Castillo on the show here a couple of months ago, and Facebook banned that show. And we didn't talk a lot about politics, but you really need to hear Dr. Ramon del Castillo speak. I mean, he's very powerful. And I don't want to take anything away from any other of the poets that'll be there, but I mean, it's going to be very worthwhile to be there, to see this and listen.
Yeah, I know Ricardo Laforet is going to be there.
Yes.
Hoser from the band Los Mocochetes is going to be there. Who else? I knew I shouldn't have done this because I will forget some people's names. We need to pull up that list, man.
And I know I have it in the email. Let me see if I can come upon it here. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of very, you know, affluent, very, very experienced writers.
Yeah.
Influential, excuse me.
Influential, right. So that, all of that is, I mean, these things are happening because of Calma, and the foresightedness of the original founders of the group. You know, now it's starting to pay off. So I would encourage any writer who's interested in this kind of stuff to check out the website and see if this kind of organization would fit your particular needs as a writer.
Yes, and I'm not finding it.
Oh, that's all right.
Well, I'm sorry, guys.
You can find it on the Calma website.
Yes. Remember, Calmaco, CALMACO.org. Okay, I got the Calma website. General meeting, International Latino Books Award. Forgive me, guys. I am not finding it. As soon as I get it, I will get it back to you. Get back to you and get that name of all of the people who will be reading poetry at that gathering. You know, one of the things that I see on your page all the time is a thing called La Bloga.
Yeah.
What is La Bloga?
Oh,
It's a blog.
It's a blog, right? It's the oldest active Latino literature blog in the world.
Wow.
I mean, we started that back in, what, 2005, was it? Something like that. One of the authors who's now part of Calma, Rudy Garcia, myself, and a guy from California, Michael Sedano, decided that we needed to have a place where we could talk about literature and culture and art. And so we did it, you know. I mean, we set it up, and we called it La Bloga, and we have been going since then. So just about every day there's a new post on La Bloga. We have about a dozen various contributors to La Bloga with a wide variety of interests. And they're really from all over. We've got quite a few from California, from Colorado. We've got a couple who have migrated to the East Coast. And so we talk about books, we talk about movies, we talk about food.
Wow, very, very
health issues.
A big variety of topics.
Yeah, and like I say, just about every day you'll find something new on La Bloga. And La Bloga is at labloga.blogspot.com. So that, or if you do a search for just La Bloga, we usually turn up first. I mean, we've just been around for so long that we get a lot of hits. We developed early on a database of Latino writers, and we've had interviews of all kinds of writers that we put up on La Bloga. This past week, we had a couple of opinion pieces. One of our writers, Daniel Cano from Los Angeles, posed the question, where are all the Mexican-American intellectuals? So just by raising the question, you know, you see, well, what side are you on that issue? You know, I mean, what is an intellectual? Is it true we don't have that many, or is it, are we different from other so-called intellectuals? So he started that conversation, and then another writer, Melinda Palacios from Santa Barbara and New Orleans, followed that up with another column about the same kind of stuff. So it kind of, the conversation went on all week about that topic, which you really can't find anywhere else.
Wow.
Where else is anybody going to be talking about that kind of stuff? So.
Yeah, that's almost taboo in a lot of circles.
Yeah, right. You know.
I for lack of a better word, I just can't think of any other term to disguise, you know, to describe that. But not everybody wants us to be intellectuals. You know?
Yeah, and I know you have your issues with Facebook, but so did La Bloga, and we went through a couple of years where if we tried to share the website, like if I wanted to post it on my page in Facebook, it would go up, and then almost immediately it would be
against community standards.
Right, it would be blocked out by Facebook. And we contacted people at Facebook. We went back and forth with them. We told them there wasn't anything in here that violated any kind of standards, code of conduct or standards. Eventually they agreed, but it took a couple of years to do that before we could actually get La Bloga up there on Facebook without having it be censored for some weird reason. So.
Yeah, fear. I think it's fair. I don't know. Hey guys, if you're just joining us, you're watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS Denver on Melody Drive. We are talking to Manuel Ramos. He has a short story in this collection, Denver Noir. And we're having a great discussion today. I want to make sure and talk about our show sponsor, David G. Ronquillo, who wrote a trilogy of, and this is Make It Go Away, one of his 3 books available. If you listen to KRHS, you hear all of the advertisements on the book that are continuously running. So please do go get yourself a copy of one of these books soon. We're talking to Manuel Ramos, and you know, as I said earlier, he was inducted into the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame. He is the author of 11 books, and you know, we've only gotten a chance to talk to you about one book, you know, Angels in the Wind, and besides this one. And I'm real curious about some of your other writings, some of your other works.
Okay. What would you like to know?
Well, tell me, what are some of the, you know, I'm sure you've had some books that you've liked more than others, and you've had some books that you're emotionally tied to more than others. Are there any such books for you?
Well, I'll tell you, most of what I write is crime fiction, you know, mysteries, detective stories, noir. And my very first book was called The Ballad of Rocky Ruiz, and it involved some Chicano activists back in the day of the Chicano movement in the 1970s, and one of them gets killed, and then fast forward, you know, 20 years later, one of the people involved has become an attorney. That was Luis Montes, who was my main character in 5 books.
Wow.
but this one started it, you know, and he's going through a midlife crisis, and he's got to figure out what happened to his friend Rocky, you know, 20 years before, because he was never satisfied with the official version of what happened to Rocky. So he gets into that mystery, you know, of trying to resolve something that occurred when he was a younger man and much more politically active. And because of that book, you know, then I was able to expand on the character of Louis Montes, the lawyer. And like I said, he appeared in 5 books eventually. So the main character in my books now is a guy named Gus Corral, who grew up and was raised on the north side of Denver, the streets of Denver. And he's a different character from Louis, but again, facing the same kind of issues that Montes related to in his youth, you know, just kind of showing, well, the more things change, maybe the more things stay the same, especially with our kind of communities, you know. There's progress, but then we take 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
Man, oh man, yeah.
So Gus is dealing with that kind of stuff, you know, the gentrification of the north side, the changes, police brutality, discrimination, some of the stuff that Montes was fighting earlier. But you asked if there was a particular book that, you know, I felt closer to. So obviously my very first one, The Ballad of Rocky Ruiz, you know, just took me to places I never thought I would go. I mean, literally around the world because of that book. You know, I went to book conferences in Spain and traveled to England and that kind of stuff. So because of the book, you know. But there was one book that when it was published, I was very excited about. It wasn't crime fiction. It was just a straightforward story. It was the life story of a particular man, and I called it King of the Chicanos.
Oh, cool.
And the guy in that book, Hidalgo, grew up as a farm worker, you know, dirt poor in Texas, becomes involved in politics, becomes a leader of the movement.
Wow.
And then has a fall. You know, he rises and falls. I mean, it's that kind of story. And unfortunately, that book isn't, you know, because it wasn't crime fiction. It was, I don't think people really related to me, you know, so much as some of my other books. So that one, you know, also was kind of special for me because it's different and it's a story that that book took me 10 years to write. You know, when I first started thinking about it and making notes and all that and working on other things, getting other books published. By the time I was finished with King of the Chicanos, it had been 10 years, and it was published by a small press out of Texas. It's kind of hard to find these days, but it's out there.
Oh, cool, cool. Where are most of your books available? Most of it online? Do you have books at the Tattered Cover bookstore?
Different bookstores, yeah. Tattered Cover, West Side Books on 32nd.
Oh, okay.
Lois Harvey there is the owner. She usually has some of my books. The Book Bar on Tennyson and about 43rd. Occasionally has some of my books, and one of the venues for Denver Noir is at the Book Bar. Oh, cool. So they'll have my books for sale there. So yeah, and if a bookstore doesn't have the books, they can certainly order them.
Yep. They have POD, print on demand.
Well,
or
you just order them from the publisher, and you know they're ready. Besides bookstores, you know, of course you can get them online. You know, the typical places for shopping have my books. You can go to my website, and there's links to the publisher. Most of my books lately have been published by Arte Publico out of the University of Houston in Texas. And of course, you can always order books directly from them, and they've got it. So
cool, very cool. Did you always know you were going to be a writer, or did they just come upon you one day and you said, "I'm going to write a book"?
I've wanted to write since I was a kid. You know, actually. I grew up in a small town in Colorado, Florence, Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Down there by Canyon City and on the banks of the Arkansas River. I grew up in that community, and one of the places where I used to hang out was the public library.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, I spent a lot of time in the library reading, and eventually they got to know me there, and so literally I could read just about any book I wanted to, and I did. You know, I read a lot of mysteries. I read the classic mystery stories of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, people like that. And because of that, because I was into reading so much, it was just kind of natural that eventually I wanted to be able to produce my own stuff that other people could read.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thinking, well, if this book could help me escape, for lack of a better word, you know, to other places around the world, what happens if I try to write my own stuff about it too?
Mm.
So yeah, as a young kid in Florence, I started writing stuff, character sketches. We moved to Colorado Springs, where I finished high school. And there was a teacher there named Treva French at the high school I went to in Colorado Springs. I went to Harrison High in Springs. And Treva was very supportive of my writing and very encouraging.
Mm.
And so she kind of validated that I actually could be a writer. You know, she was very much in tune with her students and very supportive, and so she kind of gave me that boost. I went to college. I went to Colorado State University in Fort Collins and continued to write while I was going through college. I wrote poetry, short stories, you know, essays, that kind of stuff. And so all along I'm thinking that I could write as, you know, and do other things too.
Mm.
But when I graduated from CSU, then I went to law school in Boulder. And there the creative writing stopped.
Mm-hmm.
As I focused on...
Very regimented, much more.
Yeah, right, exactly. As I focused on becoming an attorney through law school, and then for about a dozen years after that, you know, establishing myself and working as an attorney, working for Legal Aid of Colorado. And it was about a dozen years later that I returned to short fiction, and to, well, longer fiction too, actually. But I wrote a short story about a Chicano attorney, and there you go.
Wow.
It started.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you get? I mean, now you're not writing anything right now. Are you working on any new works right now?
Well, I'm thinking about it.
Uh-huh.
But I'm not tuned in like I get when.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you sit there and kind of wait for the idea?
No, you've got to work at it.
Yeah.
I think. You know, if I waited for inspiration, I'd never get anything done. You know? I've got to. I've got to be disciplined about it, and once I start to get an idea, then really work on it and keep at it and go with it. You know.
Yeah.
And so I'm expecting that I'll get back to it here later this year. You know, and start to produce something longer, but. For now, I'm excited about the short story that is coming out and the publicity and the marketing that we're going to do behind it.
Oh yeah, this is international. This is
yeah, right. The different venues, and we'll see what happens with it, and then take it from there. One other thing that's happening to me now in terms of writing is that an earlier short story that I wrote, actually 2 or 3 years ago now, it was published in an anthology called Culprits. And the idea there was that the editors, the two guys who were going to edit the book, came up with the idea of there's a gang of thieves who pull a heist on a very rich and wealthy Texan, and you know, steal his money that he's got hoarded away, and then the gang splits up. And so the editor said, we want writers who will take one of the members of the gang and write the story of what happens to them after
they break up,
after the heist, right? So I got invited to write a story for that, picked a character, wrote the story, and I think we have like 10 different characters in the book. And it's culprits, like I said. And so that came out a couple of years ago, got some attention. And lo and behold, out of the blue, I hear from the editors again, about a year ago, that Disney X is interested in the collection.
Wow.
That they might want to do a series based on the stories.
Mm.
So sure enough, the editors negotiated, and it's in production now. So they've got 8 episodes, 6 have been filmed.
Wow.
And there's 2 left to film, and then sometime in the near future it'll be coming out on, Disney Plus.
Mm.
So I'm excited about that too.
No kidding, man. That's awesome.
See,
that is really awesome. And it's just like it's starting to take a life of its own.
Yeah, like I said, out of the blue,
Mm.
I mean, a story I wrote 2 years ago or so, 3 years ago, all of a sudden I hear back about it, and now, we're getting more money and we're getting more attention, and we're actually going to see some of our work up on the TV screen or the video.
Mm.
Now, it's going to be different from the stories we wrote because, as far as I know, none of the original writers are actually involved in the scripts,
Mm-hmm.
but it's based on our stories, so we'll see what they do with it.
Wow, that is too cool, man.
Yeah, that's crazy, yeah.
That is crazy. That is crazy. Hey guys, did you hear that about inspiration? He doesn't wait for inspiration. I got to share this quick story. There was this pearl diver, and he went to into the ocean, and he found this pearl as big as his head. And he took that pearl and he saw one little flaw on it. And people who know about pearls know that you can scrape off a layer. And he figured he could scrape off a few layers and get the perfect pearl. He scraped and scraped and scraped till he got the perfect pearl. The problem was it was only this big. Guys, don't wait for an inspiration. We are the show that talks about authors. I encourage you, sit down on your laptop and write page 1. That's where it starts.
Got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, unfortunately, when I do talks, I've talked to various book clubs and classrooms and library events, and often I will meet somebody who says they want to write and they have an idea, and sometimes they've got the whole book scoped out in their head,
Mhm.
or even 2 or 3 books in a series. They know what the series would be. And I listen to them and I say, well, sounds great, yeah. How much have you actually written? Well, I'll get started here one of these days.
Yeah.
No, man, you just gotta sit down and do it.
Yep, yeah. And I'm guilty of that too. I love writing poetry, and I can't come up with ideas, or I should say my mind doesn't choose to come up with ideas. And yesterday I was sitting outside watching the wind blow, and I have this apple tree blossoming, and the wind was blowing, and these blossoms were falling off, and it's like, whoa, man! I read inside, got a poem.
Great, that sounds great.
But it's something that talking to you today really kind of makes me feel like I'm making excuses. I could have been writing poems all along.
Well, yeah, you could, but also I don't want to leave the wrong impression. It is a creative art.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And you have to be imaginative and think kind of out of the box. And you don't want it to be so hard that you get discouraged.
Mhm.
I mean, why write if you can't really enjoy it, right?
Mhm.
So there's that side of it too. I mean, you don't want to wait to get kicked in the head with inspiration, but on the other hand, you don't want to be a robot either.
Yeah, and you don't want to put slop on paper either.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got to work at it. So.
Yeah. And so it is. There's some elements involved. There's passion. There's
For
desire.
sure.
There's creativity. So there's a lot more to it. And I will say not everybody can be a writer.
No, right, exactly. Yeah.
Some people are meant to be, architects or engineers or or doctors or whatever it is that we do. And so, but there's no reason that you can't be that and a writer. There's just no reason at all. And the world is hungry. I can't even remember how many books are written a year, but it's in the hundreds of thousands every single year. And you know, I guess for me, I think about my book as a legacy that will remain after I leave this world.
Certainly,
You know?
yeah.
And, you know, have 10 books, and each one of those really encompasses your personality and your beliefs and your value systems are all really conveyed in the book that you write.
Well, yeah, if you're any good at it, they certainly are, yeah. And I think that's, you know, the old thing about how a writer opens his or her veins on the page, you know.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, you've got to be willing to let yourself go and put yourself out there.
Yep.
Because it's a very personal activity, but you're doing it for everybody else to read it.
It's a
know?
gift. It's like you're giving a gift to the world.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good way of looking at it. I have this thought every once in a while that, you know, I've written something, I've written a story or a book, then I turn it loose, and then the readers are going to do something to it.
Mm.
You know, everybody reads a book and gets a different impression,
Mm-hmm.
a different reaction, and actually it's all part of the process. You know, I may never know what their reaction is, but
Mhm.
somewhere I know people are reading the book, and there's this thing going on with something that I created. You know,
Really?
that came out of I mean, it didn't exist before I did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've created this book. Now other people are doing something with that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all part of the process.
Yes, yes. I've heard it said that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I know that there's someone that's in this listening audience, whether you're in the United States, whether you're overseas, wherever you are, that are sitting there at your laptop and thinking to yourself, man, he's right. I got to get out there and write. And you know what? Don't let that little voice in your head stop you guys. I don't care if it's a blog. I don't care if it's a post on Facebook. Start somewhere. There's a starting point. And you know what? The next page comes after the first.
Yeah, that's the way to look at it. You
Yes.
know, one page at a time, one paragraph at a time.
You bet. You bet.
Whatever, and then pretty soon you'll be one book at a time.
Yeah.
So,
Todd Fonnestock was one of my guests. He's written 22 books. He's about 45 years old.
yeah.
And you know, he sits down and he really just disciplines himself to write 2,000 words a day,
Wow.
which that's a lot of writing.
That's a lot of writing.
That's all. And I mean, doesn't surprise me that he's written. And now he's in his 23rd book. He just
Yeah.
released one, but it's really does require a level of discipline. It really does more than anything, I think. And I've only written one book, so I'm not an authority. But passion has to be involved in every word you write. It has to be.
Yeah, that combination is great. You know, passion, commitment, discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that, you can get some great creativity. So.
Yep. And then I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
Kimberly Sanchez wrote a book, Amor Eterno, and that book took place starting in the 1500s. So not only did she have to have that passion and commitment, but she also had to have a lot of research and I mean, she wanted accuracy and she wanted, phraseology and she wanted, all of the details in her book to be accurate. And man, when you read her book, it's like, whoa, reminiscent of Victor Villaseñor in his book, Reign of Gold.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I know Kimberly did a lot of research
Oh, yes.
for her book. And she was one of the founders of Calma.
Yes.
Her and Frank Davila,
Davila.
and Ricardo Laforet, Cristina Martinez Montoya, various people, so
Mm-hmm.
all part of Calma.
Yes. You guys, like I say, tomorrow at Raíces, 2:00, I'll be there. I'm excited about this. I've been looking forward to this since I first heard about it because I want to be around intellectuals who look like me. I mean, even if they drag me in a little. No, but I'm serious, guys. You will not be disappointed. You walk around this room and you shake hands with these authors, and you just ask them a little bit about the background and their writing and their storytelling, and you'll be so impressed and so pleased that you went. And that food truck outside, I got to tell you, is so good.
The beer's not bad either.
And the beer's pretty good too. Just a quick thing about Raíces, just a little plug for them. They actually are very sustainable. They have a business model that's very unique unto itself. I believe the word was self-sustaining. And so this is a great place to go. It's out of the way. There's plenty of parking there. There's going to be a lot of entertainment there to see, and rub shoulders with some really, really smart people.
I'm trying to find that thing.
Oh,
Let's see if I can find it.
there's, by the way, there was also another. Was it two Calma authors that are in this collection here?
Yeah, Mario Acevedo's in it.
Yes. Let me get my glasses here. Yeah, Mario Acevedo. Yes. Will he be there tomorrow?
Yes,
I think
yes,
he will. Yes.
he'll be there tomorrow.
But like this Noir collection, I mean, there's Accra Noir, Addis Noir, Alabama. I mean, Beirut. I'm just kind of going through Brooklyn, Buffalo Noir, Chicago Noir, Los Angeles Noir, Houston, Milwaukee, New Jersey. Forthcoming books in Austin, Cleveland, Jerusalem West, Central Noir, South Central Noir. I mean, this collection is really, really a great collection of books.
It's a very popular collection. It's won all kinds of awards. I would highly recommend Los Angeles Noir. I thought those stories were just over the top, man. They're very good writers.
I'll bet.
From Los Angeles. So.
Yeah, there's some good stories out of Los Angeles that I'm sure that they could tell.
Oh, I've got the information on the poetry thing.
Oh, please.
It's called The Evolution of Chicana Poetry, Old School versus New School. It's on May 15th from 2 to 5 at the bar at Plaza 38. And the panelists include Ricardo Laforet, Ramon del Castillo, Laura Soto, Margie Domingo, and Hoser.
So that's going to be a good lineup.
Yeah, very good people there on that panel. Different genres, different kinds of poets.
So 38th Plaza right there at 38th and Lowell, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really nice place. I've been in there too, and they're really, really easy to get to, easy to find, and there's plenty of seating in there. And man, I'll tell you what, lighten up your soul. Feed yourself some good literature. Feed yourself some poetry. It's really good for you. So now, do you still write poetry?
Occasionally. I mean, not much lately, but I have published poems over the years, different kinds of poetry. I don't consider myself a poet because I'm just so impressed by people who are poets, and a little intimidated actually because they can do so much with words and images. When I was first starting out as a published writer of fiction, and was publishing some poetry too, I did an event with I think Ramon was in it, Ramon del Castillo, Lalo Delgado, and another person whose name unfortunately.
Man, you're talking about legends.
Yeah, and so we were all on the stage, and of course Ramon reads, and then Lalo reads, and this other person whose name I'll think of after we finish the show.
Naturally.
They got up there and they just wiped everybody out. I mean, they're tremendous.
Oh yeah.
And so I get up there and I read my little poetry, and I vowed to myself I would never do that again. I mean, it's just
humbling.
Yeah, I mean, these are legends that were reading their poetry, and I said, I can't keep up with that, man.
It reminds me of ninth grade field day. I was in a running race. I can't remember the kid's name. It was Russell. He was a fast kid, and I'm in that race, and they're all at the finish line. I'm starting, and it's like, boy, that was humbling. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're good, if you're not that good, or if you're terrible. Your poetry is your poetry. That's your work of art, and it's an extension of who you are. Guys, I say it every week. You got to start somewhere. And again, I realize not everyone's a writer, but you know what? Everyone has some information, a gift inside themselves, a story. Everyone has a book in them. Just page one.
Yeah, and actually, I would spread that out even a little bit more. I think creating something is essential to a well-balanced spirit.
It is. It really is.
If you paint, or you work with clay, or you, I don't know, if you garden, anything that, like I was talking about before, my book, it exists because I created it. It wasn't there before I worked on it. So any time you exercise your brain, you exercise your imagination to do that, to create something that wasn't there before. I mean, you're adding to the world. You're actually changing the world every time you do that. The world is different after you've done it, and it's so satisfying, and it really improves your mental health. Your well-being.
Man, you're so right. You're so right. Thank you for that. That's a reward that I really hadn't thought about. But you're so true. You're so right. I remember, I don't care if I'm working out in the backyard. A couple of days ago we got some pallets and made a little garden table, and it's like we stood back and said, "Oh, why?"
Yeah, there you go, man. Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're the creator of that, and it gives you so much autonomy, and that creative spirit it just releases more energy in you, and once you start, man, I mean, you just don't know. You might be the author of 10 books yourself.
There you go.
Bet you never thought about that. What's next for you? What do do you have anything in the works for, you mentioned that you're probably going to start writing again soon?
Well, I think so. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. My first book was actually published in 1993. I've got, like I said, 11 novels that I've published. This short story collection, I'm in about a dozen short story collections like it, I'm 74 now. I'm developing other interests. For example, I want to start